All right. Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, How Top Insurers Are Optimizing Operations and Customer Experience with Flexibility and Agility. We are very excited to present this webinar alongside our partners, Insuresoft and GhostDraft. My name is Carolina Congdon and I will be your host for today. I'm pleased to have three amazing presenters joining me, but before I introduce them, let's start with some basics about the webinar. So first of all, our time commitment today is 1 hour. We will have approximately 45 minutes of content to share with time for a question and answer period at the end. You'll notice a toolbar at the bottom of the webinar browser that allows you to submit your questions. And as the host, I will be monitoring all of those questions as they come in. So if I notice one that comes up mid-webinar that needs immediate attention for clarification, I'll interrupt and ask our speakers to clarify the point. Otherwise, we'll save all of the questions until the end. And finally, we will provide you with a recording of the webinar within 2 business days. So feel free to share with your colleagues if you found it valuable. So as we make our way to the new normal after COVID-19, organizations are looking to redefine and modernize their operational workflows and customer experience. While there are a variety of digital transformation options available, the value of a quick pivot, as we're calling it today, in this critical time can be the difference between being a leader and losing your footing. So our thought leaders are here today to discuss how companies serving the insurance sector can easily and safely make the shift for a quick win supported by the right partner ecosystem. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly introduce each speaker, and then each speaker will review a quick pivot win that they have experienced in their business that has really made an impact. I'll then open the floor up for a panel discussion. We'll all turn our videos on so that you guys can see our speakers, and we'll discuss the topics of automation, quick pivots, flexibility, and partnerships. And then any remaining time at the end, we will allocate to questions that come from the audience. So I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker of the day, Tracy Boursin. She is our VP of Sales and Marketing here at SPLICE Software. She's dedicated to helping insurance carriers build out proactive communication solutions that create a superior policyholder experience. She excels at profiling internal and external experience, creating internal efficiencies through automation, and then overall improving policyholder stickiness. She's been a member of the SPLICE team since 2012, and I have had the pleasure of working with her since my start as well at SPLICE. Our second speaker is Josh Hall, National Sales Manager at Insuresoft. Josh has over 20 years of hands-on experience across the insurance value chain. He focuses on helping companies improve their communication processes by evaluating customer journey. And at Insuresoft, he has been driving partnerships and client relationships since 2014. And I'm happy to say that I've had the pleasure of working with Josh for the last few years on a couple of our integrations together. And last but not least, our final speaker for today is Angie Wynn, VP of Business Development and Alliances at GhostDraft. Her expertise is focused around customer communication and document automation, where she has over 25 years of experience and leads GhostDraft's implementation and services team. I've also had the pleasure of getting to know Angie over the last couple of years, and I would have to say that her bio very much undersells her abilities. So we'd like to welcome our 3 speakers for today. And now we will move on to our quick pivot wins portion of the webinar, in which each company is going to talk about a quick pivot that they have experienced in their companies. And we will start with SPLICE. So I will go ahead and pass it off to Tracy. Go ahead, Tracy.
Thanks, Carolina, and really great to be here with everybody today. Quick overview for those of you who aren't familiar with SPLICE. SPLICE's overall goal as a company is to help insurers automate their workflows specifically with digital communications. And there's really two primary factors that play into that. One of them is the creation of operational efficiencies. We really want to make sure that we can give people a good ROI on any program that we implement, as well as building that customer experience. So always that two-pronged approach, and really excited to talk about this specific example, which I think it's a really great example of the quick pivot and the wins that you could see on both of those sides in one implementation. So the solution we're going to be profiling today is an award-winning first notice of loss program that we implemented for safety insurance. They actually won an IASA Technology Innovation Award for the program. And when safety came to us, they had a huge problem with the amount of inbound call volume they were seeing with questions that were related to their first notice of loss. So originally they were doing an email-only program to notify people that they had received their claim and it was now in process. And the fact of the matter was that people just weren't looking at their emails. And so they were calling into the call center, asking the questions that technically had been covered in the email. And so really all of that call center time was being, in essence, wasted. With that comes an increased cost of claims because you have the cost of the agents, you have a longer cycle because people aren't taking their call to action right away. And so it really was kind of compounding from first notice of loss forward. Another struggle they were having was that their resources were limited. And so they wanted to implement automation and they wanted a technology solution, but they didn't really have a huge team of resources to be able to make that work internally. So that's when they reached out to the tech partner ecosystem to try and find a solution that would work for them. So working with SPLICE, we implemented a proactive notification program that told people by an automated call or a text based on the policyholder's channel of preference that their claim had been started and that all of the other details were provided in their email. So again, that kind of two-prong approach, saying like we want to create the operational efficiencies by making people move forward more quickly on the claim by being more informed, and a better customer experience, having it not sit in your inbox and you expecting something to happen on your claim and nothing is happening. In terms of the resources front, we were able to work with a very small team at safety. So there was a 3-man team, one person in data, one business analyst who was kind of the project lead, and then one person who came in a little bit here and there, working with the API. So we did set up all of the data transfer to be done in an automated fashion. SPLICE has a variety of documented APIs that we can use for that purpose that are pre-documented, so it's very easy to implement. And so we set that up with the team and with a 3-man project team at safety, and from discovery to go live, it was an 8-week implementation. And as I mentioned, that API automation was included in that as well. So I know often when we think about having fully automated solutions, we think that it's this huge project and needs lots of people and it takes tons of time, but 3-man team, 8 weeks, and we were able to, this is the really big winner here, we decreased the amount of hours spent answering first notice of loss questions in the call center by 630 hours in the first 3 months. So I don't know how much a lot of you know about the cost of a call center agent, but they're not the cheapest resource. And when you multiply that by 630, it is a huge cost savings. So not only do we help them realize that giant cost savings in their call center, but the experience was better for the customer. They were informed right away, and throughout the process, they were able to communicate in their channel of preference and move the claim along more smoothly. That's the quick pivot we have for today.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. It's great to know how automation can be not such a scary thing, how it can improve customer experience, but then also really reduce those cost savings. So to pass it along to our second speaker, I will pass it off to Josh from Insuresoft.
I'm really excited to be here with everybody today, and just to let everybody know, Insuresoft is a core system provider. We actually work with a little more than 40 insurance carriers across the P&C market. And what's interesting is each one has a very unique communication style with their policyholders. Some will leverage the typical brick and mortar distribution model with agents, while others are direct to consumer. And more insurers are turning to more of a blended model. But what they're doing is they're really shifting to new strategies to meet clients where they are. So historically, core systems providers wanted to be the end-all be-all for their clients, but we see ourselves more as enablers of a digital insurance platform model. So insurers have a tremendous amount of data, and the overarching goal with most of our clients is how do we actually use that data beyond just data collection in terms of being more event-driven with their communication with policyholders. So as they flip the lens to more of an empathy-driven customer experience focus, it allows them to really meet those customers where they are. In a recent Capgemini survey in 2016, which actually feels like it was a million years ago at this point, approximately 17% of consumers were willing to buy insurance from large tech companies like Amazon, Apple, and Google. In 2020, though, the number doubled to more than 36%. So we can make some assumptions there that in that period of time, these companies like Amazon, Apple, and Google continued to meet consumers where they were and provided a reasonable, enjoyable experience. And they also built trust, which is paramount when you're focusing on the customer journey. So how do we actually leverage that data to communicate with clients proactively? More or less a case study here is, we work with a customer that uses our core platform, and they actually insure a lot of coastal risks. Hurricane season is just around the corner here, and preparedness is really key to reducing risk. So proactive communication is a crucial differentiator in the marketplace. There's a couple of things that you really do is you build your brand and you distinguish amongst your competitors, and you create a lot of brand loyalty. So in this particular instance, this carrier actually went and redesigned the customer journey with these digital elements. They leveraged the core platform as well as the SPLICE toolkit to actually reduce their CAT exposure with a lot of proactive notifications out to their policyholders. I think more importantly than that is they actually gave policyholders the information prior to a potential CAT event to ensure that they could communicate with the carrier in the event of a loss. So they've turned from a reactive organization into more of a proactive organization by actually plugging the SPLICE toolkit into the core platform to leverage that data. So it was a quick win for them, and they definitely had an opportunity to distinguish their brand in the marketplace.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. And Angie, how about you? Take it away with your case study surrounding core systems migration.
Great, thanks. I'm happy to be here today. I appreciate everyone who's in attendance. So to start with, let me tell you a little bit about GhostDraft and who we are. GhostDraft helps insurance providers transform their communications into engaging experiences. We have over 70 top insurance customers across North America. They're using our intuitive CCM platform to streamline the creation, the delivery, and the management of the personalized omni-channel communications that they deliver to their customers. GhostDraft interfaces into the business to empower you to strengthen, expand, and acquire customer relationships, to create greater efficiencies and more agility, and to minimize your compliance risk. The case study that I'm going to talk about today is a customer who has been a GhostDraft customer for about 5 years. They provide excess and surplus liability insurance into for medical facilities. When they became a GhostDraft customer, we integrated into their existing policy underwriting and administration system. They weren't completely happy with that system, but they had bigger communication needs. So we integrated to that system, knowing that their long-term plans are going to be to actually replace that system with something that provided them better functionality. So last year, they determined it was time to do that replacement. They acquired a new policy administration or underwriting and policy administration system, and we integrated GhostDraft to that new system. The thing that was really cool about that is all the investment that they had made in developing their communications, policy documents, claims documents, underwriting communications, all of those documents, that investment they had made there, they were able to seamlessly move over to their new platform. With the GhostDraft tooling, we separate the business rules and logic that live inside the templates that drive the template behavior away from the sourcing and transformation of data. So because of that layer of isolation that exists between the two in our platform, when you're looking to move the source of data from one system to another, the only thing that has to be reconstructed is the data mapping layer. So as part of that migration, the carrier did have to create a brand new mapping for the new data source from the new system, but all the investment they had made in templates carried over. The estimation was from the carrier that about 70% of the investment that they had made in the overall initial implementation was completely reusable with this new implementation. And that other 30% was the remapping from or into a new data source. So they were very excited and thrilled about this capability because they felt like the investment they had made initially in GhostDraft really future-proofed them from the perspective of a core system. So they could switch to a different core system and not have to have a huge reinvestment in developing communications with the new system.
Great, thanks, Angie. I feel like that's what insurance companies struggle with all the time is that core systems migration and updating their systems to newer and potentially more digital solutions like Josh was talking about. So that brings us to the next portion of our webinar, which is going to be our panel discussion. So I will ask all of our speakers to turn on their videos. Hello, everyone. It's nice to put a face to a name. Make sure no one's catfishing based on the pictures that are on the screen.
So, sorry, Caroline, it tells me I can't because the host has stopped it.
Oh, there we go. Let's see.
Okay,
how about
good.
that? All right.
Awesome, thanks. Hi.
So our first question is going to be directed at SPLICE, and we're going to talk a little bit about automation. So Tracy, how is automation creating efficiencies for insurance carriers? You are on mute.
I'm on mute. Sorry, guys. All right, so efficiencies. I love talking about efficiencies because, as I mentioned in the case study, I don't really believe that as much as everybody loves customer experience and a better customer experience, unless we can say that we have some kind of value proposition, a business case likely just isn't going to make it through the organization. So those efficiencies are really, really a huge piece of it. I think there's a couple factors that play in here. One of the things is consistency. So the nice thing about automation, and specifically in a SPLICE scenario, when we're looking at doing the types of communications that maybe a call center agent would do, you're not going to be risking that call center agent had a bad day and sounded grumpy on the phone. And so that customer experience is something different. You have the same customer experience throughout the entire organization. So it really can help you maintain that brand consistency and the customer journey promises that you're making to your policyholders. It also helps increase the speed. So when you're not dependent on a person doing a thing, something can happen much faster. So when we talk about the API economy and data transfers just being instantaneous, you really just, you don't have to wait. Something happens and immediately it can be addressed. And in that addressing of whatever it is event-based trigger that you're looking at, you are providing that policyholder with an opportunity to help them move forward. So a piece of communication, again, should also always have a, there should be a goal. So you should, there should be a reason why I'm talking to you about something. And if I'm talking to you about something, then I want to be able to move you to the next stage as quickly as possible. And by having automation support those efficiencies, you really can increase the speed, increase the consistency, which overall drives the entire customer experience.
Awesome. Josh, Angie, anything to add in there?
No, I think Tracy did a good job covering it.
Yeah, just one thing to add. You know, I've talked to a bunch of carriers since we all started staying at home. And one of the things I keep hearing is the fact that they have uncovered manual processes that, of course, they knew were there, but didn't cause so much of a pain point because everyone was in the office and they kind of just dealt with them as the normal course of business. And as soon as we all went home, these manual processes really became a pain point. And so I think the drive towards automation is perhaps forefront in the mind for a lot of carriers right now because of the light that got shined in or shown into those dark corners where the little manual processes were hiding and had been there for years. And they knew they did those things manually, but volume wasn't high, people could manage. But now all of a sudden, the lack of connectivity, physical connectivity together caused a big problem. So I think it's going to be interesting over the next 6 to 9 months to see how carriers approach those things. The resolution of those little hidden manual processes by deploying automation, I think is going to be, there's a great opportunity there from a carrier perspective. And as a vendor, I'm very excited about being able to help them solve those kind of problems.
I think that's a really great point, Angie, because those manual processes also, in our quick pivots, we mostly were talking about the external piece of automation and how you can automate to impact your end policyholders, but there's so many of those manual processes internally as well. And internally, you're still working with people and people need to be informed. And a lot of those processes can be automated as well. So there's not only are we talking about the end policyholder experience, your employee experience could greatly be impacted by automation opportunities also.
Absolutely.
Oh, I think we might have lost Josh a little bit there. Hopefully he jumps right back on. So each of you guys talked a little bit about your quick pivot. So what are some of the best practices to set up your organization up to be ready to be able to implement these quick pivots? So let's start left to right. Tracy, how about you? Why don't you go first?
Well, of course, you want to have the right tech partner, which is why we're all here today. But more specifically, a couple of really important things that we've seen on the SPLICE side that really can help move more quickly. First thing is knowing who the team is. So that doesn't have to be a huge team. As I mentioned in our quick pivot example with safety, we had a 3-person team. This isn't like a 20-person team that you necessarily need to have, but you do need to know who those people are. You need to know who is the decision maker. You need to know who is going to be help you in a technical capacity. So when you're talking about a technology partner, usually there's some technology piece, even minimally if it's like a data transfer, that somebody who knows something about data or the system would need to know. Again, in the tech partner scenario, if you're using a core system like Insuresoft and Insuresoft is plugged in with some really great tech partners like GhostDraft and SPLICE, then you don't have to be worried about that technology piece, and you probably just have like one guy who can make all the decisions and get stuff going. But knowing who that is and making sure that you have the right team of people is really critical, because if you get halfway through and then you have to reach out for different approvals, or you have to go to procurement or wherever you might have to go, it can delay the process. So knowing who that team is really important. And then I touched on it a little bit, but knowing your data. So when you're talking about communications in particular, you are communicating a specific thing, and knowing what can go into that and how to get access to it is really important. So if you want to make phone calls, but you can't get phone number data out of your database, we should just stop at the beginning. We've had a lot of clients that get all the way down. We've like done tons and tons of discovery, and then they're like, oh, we can't get the data in a format that is usable. And then all of that time invested is lost. So making sure that what you need for any kind of project is available and you're aware of what that is, and making sure you know who the team is that can implement.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. I saw Josh took like a quick trip to San Francisco and then he disappeared again. Are you there? Did you make it home
Can you all
safely?
hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
I see you too.
All right. I can still hear you. That my internet went down, so I apologize for that.
No
But
worries.
anyways, talking about some of the best practices.
Yes.
So I'm joining on my phone now, so hopefully you can see me. I think more and more customers really need to focus on or insurance carriers need to focus on the customer journey. I don't know that we always look at who our policyholders are. So most of the people on the call are probably very familiar with all of the acronyms that we use, and OOS for out of sequence endorsement transactions and FNOL for first notice of loss. But we have to put ourselves and be mindful of putting ourselves in the customer's shoes. So it's a bad accident that happened, right? It's not just a tree fell on my home or there's a hurricane coming, so we've got to be cat prepared. It's really focused on them and what they need to be able to do, and giving customers, policyholders, the ability to engage in their preferred method. So whether that's a text, it's an email, it's a phone call, it's imperative to really bolster your brand, but to be that trusted partner that is going to build that brand equity and that brand loyalty for the long term. And speed and transparency are super important. So even going back to the case study that I'd mentioned, being proactive quickly with a hurricane bearing down on the coast to your policyholders that live in the impacted area is a huge differentiator in the market. So when I look at those best practices, that's really what I'm looking at and talking to our customers about. And I think that, for our customers, because of partnerships that we've built with companies like GhostDraft and SPLICE, nobody ever wants to be first, and they really want a proven methodology to come in and to leverage as they look at how they actually want to meet their customers where they are. So being first, being second, being third, let's look at those opportunities to plug into that digital insurance platform and really meet those customers where they are.
Awesome. Angie, how about you? Any best practices to add?
I think the thing that I would add there is if you're trying to do a quick pivot and it is something that your organization hasn't done before, so it's a brand new idea, it's something that you think is going to be really impactful for your customers, but you've not actually done it, you really should leverage some experts. Go find a vendor partner or a consulting company, find somebody who has expertise in this area so that they can help navigate you through that first project. So you can get it done quickly, be able to discover the benefits of that pivot that you're implementing. And then the flip side of that is you also need to ensure that as you come to the end of that project, that you have a really thorough turnover of what was done back into your core team so that your team can take over and do the maintenance on that and do it again and again and again. But we find sometimes carriers try to do something new on their own and they get stuck in the technology, or they get stuck in an area where we get called in to help, but we're like, man, we could have saved you a bunch of time had you engaged us earlier in this process. And so I think I would encourage you to also think about the companies who provide you technologies as partners, not vendors. Partner with them to solve a problem, let them help you find the solution to something, especially if you've never done it before. so that you can get that implemented quickly and implemented the right way. So you can then take it on yourself and do that in other areas of the business.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Hopefully the attendees find some really good best practices in there that they can implement in their own organizations. In terms of flexibility, I'm going to direct this question at Angie. How does customer communication management support flexibility for greater efficiency?
Yeah, so a good customer communication management system should give you the ability to future-proof yourself against the requirements you don't even know about. You know, the needs and desires that your customers are going to have 2 years from now that you need to try to set up yourself up to be able to deliver. So what does that mean? That means you need an innovative partner who is continually adding functionality to their platform. And you need a platform that's going to be flexible enough to deliver the requirements that you have today. So I'll give you some examples. The ability to create a piece of content one time and then deliver it in any way that your insureds want to receive it. If they want it on a printed piece of paper, if they want it in an email, if they want it in an SMS text message, if they want it on social media, and. Those are not ors, those are ands. And so the ability to create that content one time and then deliver it across all the channels in a seamless fashion is really important. The ability to have configuration, not code, in your CCM is really important. From a GhostDraft perspective, we provide a workflow engine. All of our customers integrate to this workflow engine. As soon as you've integrated to that workflow engine, all the activity that happens around creating and delivering communication, then it's configuration on the GhostDraft side. So if you change your mind 6 months down the line and decide I'm going to print this information on a piece of paper, but I'm also going to deliver it to social media channels or out to emails or whatever that new output delivery channel requirement is, you just change configuration. And that's a huge, huge future-proof thing. So as your delivery methods and desires change, you really should be able to do that through an easy configuration tool, not having to go back and change that integration code between the core system that's triggering that piece of communication and your communication engine. I think you really also need to empower your business. If you think about policy forms, the people who know about the changes that are needed on policy forms are people in the business. And that idea that those business people need to go interface with IT and have IT then make changes to the form automation tool is not very efficient. So if you can empower the business user with technology to make those changes, of course, in a compliant way, you want to make sure that they're not going to break things, but you give them technology that allows them to do that configuration in conjunction with their IT counterparts. So they still need support from IT, but a lot of that work can be done by the business user. It's a much better model. The business user is the one who knows and understands the requirements. Having them interface that into IT so IT can do the work is very inefficient. So that kind of flexibility drives efficiencies. So flexibility is, it's a whole bunch of features and functions in products, but the reason it's important is it drives things like speed to market. If I can get forms, changes, new forms, new pieces of communication into production quickly, that's going to drive my efficiencies. It also reduces cost. Put tooling in the hands of the right person so that they can do the job that they need to do without having to go involve a whole team of people to make a change. So if business can do the changes themselves into forms, all the better, because it frees up IT people to go do the things that business people can't, writing code. And it also is more efficient. The business person knows what needs to change. Give them tooling that lets them change it. And I think ultimately, all of those flexibility, you almost could think about it as spokes on a wheel, right? All of those flexibility components allow insurance carriers to deliver the experience that their customers are looking for. So if customers want things through email today, great, let's deliver it that way. But in the future, if they want it in their SMS messenger account, let's deliver it that way. Be able to support them where they want that information to come to them so that it's fast and efficient from the end recipient's perspective.
Nice. Do Instagram and Snapchat count in there too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Josh, Tracy,
I thought
anything that you want to add in
TikTok was
there?
all the,
TikTok.
yeah, I was just gonna say I thought TikTok was all the rage these days. No, the thing that I would say, and just kind of coupled with what Angie mentioned, was just the sheer configurability of the systems that are out there today. You know, being able to be an underwriting user and be able to adjust workflows on the fly, or a claims user and being able to adjust workload, to adjust workflow based on potential risks that are out there. And what we see a lot of times too is there's so much data. A lot of these insurers, you know, even my case study is based on just an event that's coming and some historical data. They're in this hindsight type of mentality. What we're really trying to do too with our partnerships is give them a lot of foresight and predictive tools so that they can go into the marketplace and make, you know, those quick pivot wins based on the data that they collect through these different processes, right? So, you know, based on a cat coming, how many FNOLs were now transitioned to electronic communication instead of overbearing a call center, as an example. So really empowering them to have that foresight to ramp up their people, a BPO provider like one of our partners, or whatever it may be. I think just data is the new gold. So I'm looking forward to all of the insurers and their TikTok stories on a go-forward basis.
Still don't know how to use TikTok. I think I'll have to download it.
Same.
Tracy?
Same.
I think the only other thing I would just reiterate, and kind of based on what Josh had mentioned in his case study too about meeting your customers where they are, like that is those spokes of the wheel Angie spoke about, that is meeting your customer where they are. And that is what it's all about in terms of flexibility.
All right, thank you, Tracy. This question is going to be directed directly at Josh, because I just know he loves talking about partnerships. What role can technology partnerships have in facilitating quick pivots? I know you kind of talked about this a little bit already, but any more insight that you can provide would be great. I'm sure our attendees would love to hear more.
Yeah, so you know, it's imperative. Like I'd mentioned early on, you know, core system providers have kind of gone through these ebbs and flows of wanting to be all things to all people. Our mentality has really shifted. You know, kind of leave the experts to the expert type of process, right? So I'll talk a little bit about our partnership specifically with SPLICE. There's so many compliant issues that you all face with just communicating with folks. So if someone, you know, signs up to get a text message as an example, you know, they opt out of that. Like that is something that probably is outside of our wheelhouse. And we partner with companies like SPLICE to be able to actually manage that in a more efficient model. So we really want to, you know, continue to bolster those partnerships. And I can't tell you how many times I walk into insurance carriers and we start talking about all of the integrations that they have. You know, they're pleasantly surprised once we get to, you know, the table and we start to roll up our sleeves and determine, you know, well, from a customer experience perspective, you can partner with these 3 companies. From a notification perspective, you can partner with these 2 companies. Oh, credit card processing, great. Here's 6 opportunities for you to, you know, leverage digital payment strategies directly with customers. So the partnerships are very key and very critical when it comes to building out a true digital insurance platform for insurance carriers and MGAs. So the partnerships and the strength of those partnerships, you know, I mentioned earlier, people don't want to be first, but, you know, if it's tried, it's proven, and, you know, there's empirical evidence to support the partnership. That's how we look at them as an organization. Specifically, you know, even in our partnership journey, we don't just go out to market because we don't believe in marketing relationships just to have marketing relationships. It's more about a true partnership that is proven with a customer before we ever announce it to any of our customers that we have partnered with a company. So we take it very seriously because everybody's reputation is on the line with the policyholder at the end of the day.
Awesome. Tracy, anything to add?
I mean, I'm just now reiterating things that Josh has already said, but things like really when it comes down to it is like certain companies are good at certain things, and what we're moving towards in terms of the technology ecosystem is having companies that are quite niche, being really, really good at what they do, and then being able to plug in to other technology providers by API to make it easy for a company to integrate with multiple companies with multiple benefits with kind of one plugin. Like I kind of think about it as if you're plugging something into the wall and then you just get access to all of these lights turn on, right? Like that really in essence is what it is. But each of those lights is really good at its one thing. And because you already have all of the connectors in place, you just get all of the benefits. So whereas it might, I think historically, especially for insurance carriers, it seemed like the best case to just hire people and build everything internally. And we have carriers that we still are talking to now, they're comparing like, what does it look like if we build it internally versus what does it look like if we use a technology partner? And I think that some of the things that get swept under the rug are the pieces like compliance. Are you managing your opt-ins, opt-out across all of your channels? Do you have multiple text providers sending texts for different things? Do you know if someone opts out in one? And then you need to take that into consideration if you're sending texts out by another provider, right? That is something that SPLICE is specifically good at, making sure that that consent information flows throughout your entire system. So it might be a scenario where you like SPLICE doesn't do any specific forward facing because everything is just happening in the back end. But to create that from scratch, to make sure that you're doing all those things, either is a ridiculous amount of manual work or is building a system that you have no experience building. And then there's just a risk associated with that. So being able to participate in that technology ecosystem and using partners where it makes sense for what they're really good at is just where the biggest opportunity is with partnerships.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy. Angie, I know Josh and Tracy covered a lot, so I don't know how much you have left to add, but is there anything that you wanted to throw in there?
Yeah, so the only thing I'll add is that from a carrier perspective, if you're looking at a piece of technology and they have integrated partners, I would just encourage you to poke around a little bit on that integration and make sure that, Josh said sometimes we just have marketing partners. We do sometimes. At GhostDraft, we focus pretty heavily on, we call it sticking to our knitting. We focus pretty heavily on doing what we do best and being the best at it, and then integrating with people who do the things that we want to have, but we're not the best at. But for us, that means actually doing the work of doing the integration, writing the code to make our technologies talk to each other before we go out and talk to a carrier about it. And that's really important to us from our perspective, that not only have we talked about how we would integrate technologies, but we've actually done the work of integrating technologies. So from a carrier perspective, I don't think you should view integrated components as a downside. I think it's absolutely a benefit as long as you make sure that the integration exists. So when I said go poke around on that integration, that's what I meant. Go, dig up under the covers just a little bit and make sure that there is a piece of integrated code and that they have done the work to make the two pieces of technology talk to each other. And then you're going to get the benefits of both of those platforms in a really seamless way. So it just allows you to leverage things much more quickly as long as the code's there.
Awesome. So it's about time to open the floor up for questions for our panel. So if you have any questions from the audience that you want to submit, feel free to do so. There is a question and answer box for you that you can use. We have a few questions already. The first one I will probably direct towards Tracy. So we all want to be flexible when we come to communication channels, but how can we find out where our customers are so that we know which channels to invest in?
Oh, we talk to so many people about this because the number of times where people say, just be where your customers are. The unfortunate piece about it is that, like, you don't know where that is. Josh mentioned this, like, gold mine of data earlier and how this, like, data is presented. And I think a lot of times people just don't have the tools or don't know the places to look to find the data. So what I will tell you is that your customers are telling you how they want to be communicated with, and it's in your data. So the good news is you have all of that information. Now you just need to be able to find it. One of the most, like, the easiest ways to find it is to talk to the people in your call center. So as I mentioned with the safety case study, everybody was calling the call center to deal with things. When somebody can't do a thing, their default response almost always still is to call the call center. Now that's if they're actually still trying to do their thing. If they're really just mad at you, they're gonna tweet about it or post it on Facebook or something. But your social channels and your call center is where all of that information is coming in. There are tools that exist for you to be able to compile that information. They are not high cost tools. They are very, very easy to implement based on your current channels, and you can start to get that information. A really easy example, specifically from the automated calling side, is trying to understand what percentage of your client base is on a mobile device and what percentage of your customers are on a landline. Now, as you can probably imagine, as we continue in our experience economy, there are fewer and fewer people who just have landline. But depending on your brand and your customer base, like, we do business with one retailer in Florida. There's a lot of retirees that buy their furniture. So most of those people still have a landline. So again, based on your customer base, it might be a little bit different, but knowing that can really impact how you want to build your communication strategies going forward. So if you have 20% of mobile customers, you might want to do something different than if you have 80% mobile customers. If 80% of your customers on mobile, you probably should think about a text strategy if you haven't thought about one already. And then the likelihood of those people trying to communicate with you via text, which would also include inbound, needs to be looked at. So how many times, this is something that SPLICE can track too, how many times has someone texted in to a phone number that isn't actually managed by something? So when we do text distribution, we track every kind of inbound response that comes in based on that. There may or may not be an automation set up to deal with those. If you have a high volume of those, you need a program to set up how to deal with that. So, and now I've become overly explainy, but the nice thing is the data to know that exists, and the best places to look for it are in your call center and in your social media.
Thanks, Tracy. Angie, I know you have some experience in terms of customer communication in different channels. What would you have to add on to that as well in terms of letting customers know or clients know which channels they should be investing in based off your experience?
Yes, I totally agree with Tracy that the majority of that data you already have. It's maybe locked away somewhere and you need tooling to be able to help you get to that data. But you do have that available to you. I also have seen a few carriers just add a quick one question survey in the call center, as people are calling in to ask, would you prefer that we communicate with you over email? Would you prefer that we text you this? So just at the very end of each engagement on the phone in the call center to ask the customer, how do you want me to talk to you? And they run, those programs for a couple of 3 months, and then they could pretty quickly see, when they understood the demographics of their customer, but they could quickly see the preferences that were developing from that surveying that they were doing. And so that's also another way that you can pretty easily get to information by just asking a simple question when you have them on the phone already.
Such a great point, Angie. I know that almost every time we ask the question, you get an answer. And a lot of times people think, oh no, I can't ask that. It doesn't make sense in this part of the journey, blah, blah, blah. The customer wants to do business with you in a certain way. And if you ask them for that information, the likelihood of them giving it to you is very, very high. So like, all you have to do is ask.
And they appreciate being asked.
Yeah.
Josh, with someone with so much insurance experience, what kind of trends are you seeing with some of the carriers that you're working with in terms of building out their core systems, in terms of channels that they want to implement alongside that?
Yeah, that's a real good question. So I see a lot of carriers, they may have 7 source systems. They really need places to singularly report on those systems as they go through a transformation project. But again, data is the key to all of that and unlocking the value of the organization. So really what I'm seeing is a shift there into how to actually harness that data on a go-forward basis. And I've mentioned it before, but you know, insurance carriers are really good at reporting on what they have, and it gives them a real good view of what happened in the past. But it's that shift now to more of a predictive type of model, where how can I take the data that I have today and leverage that for the future, right? More of a foresight type of model as opposed to that hindsight type of model. So it's been an interesting shift in data as a whole, and I think that's really what's driving a lot of core insurance software changes, is just being able to really understand the data. So many people are caught up in, I don't even understand how my data, the schema in the data, like I can't even interpret what that looks like, but I've got this really cool report that tells me how much premium I brought in. And that's just not a viable solution into the future. As we look at, you know, even this pandemic that we've all been faced with recently, you know, how do you meet those customers where they're at with, you know, the inability to actually meet them face to face, right? So how do we empower our claims adjusters to be in the field and go out and take mobile pictures? How do we get that data back in so that we can adjudicate that claim and provide an amazing customer experience? And then ask them through a text message or whatever it may be, how did we do? Get the data back in and then continue to serve them in that capacity. So it really just revolves around data, the flow of that data, moving from a transactional type of model. I sold a policy, so I have to send out a deck page, to more event-driven. I sold a policy. I've got to send out this declaration page to our customer. We're also going to text them to get some customer service and survey feedback to them so we can give it to the agent. And maybe they want to do more direct-to-consumer type of billing, right? So we bypass the agent. I mentioned earlier, I'm seeing the lines blur between the direct-to-consumer and the brick-and-mortar type of model, and it really is just meeting them where they are and giving the policyholders the tools and allowing the insurance carriers and MGAs to harness the data to continue to serve them.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.
Data for good.
We love it. We love that hashtag.
It really is.
So we have a couple of minutes left, so I'll probably have time for one last question. So we had a question come in. With text, you have to get their permission and put special logic to allow them to opt out. What's the easiest way to implement and retain this information? Tracy, I know you talked a lot about text permission, so I don't know if you want to take that one.
I love talking about consent, so I can talk about consent. Yes, so with each different channel, the permission requirements are different. Again, I would recommend speaking to, if you're looking for communication in particular, SPLICE team is really involved in that. We work with a lot of lawyers across the different channels to make sure that everything that SPLICE does is compliant. So if we're looking at a kind of generic insurance use case for the United States, then yes, in order to text somebody, you have to have their express written consent to do so, which means they have to have specifically told you, I agree for you to text me about this. When it comes to the opt-out, you also have to give them the ability to opt out in every single message. This is something that is a best practice across communication channels. So if somebody doesn't want to receive a text message, you are not going to be giving them the experience they want by continuing to text them. So even if it wasn't a legal requirement, which it is, you would want to make sure you give them that option. So the logic that gets built in to manage those permissions, there's kind of two pieces of it. There's the collection of the permission, and that can be done in one of two ways. So either by a general form or a survey. As Angie mentioned, someone can provide that consent over phone with an agent. They can provide it on an online web form. If you're doing a quote submission, they can provide it to you in a variety of areas. Again, if you want to check out our website, we have something called our rapid opt-in capture and confirmation system, which is the SPLICE solution for managing permission. So there's some more information on there that we might not necessarily, we don't have time to like dig into it today. But the collection of that consent can be done at either there or on the channel. So every time you text somebody, they have the option to text back stop, and then that would automatically opt them out. The logic behind that automatic opt-out is then built in, and a technology partner could help you with that. Like that's something that's built into all of the SPLICE communication programs. It's a default configuration. Again, even if it's an automated call, there's an automated opt-out option there. If it's an email, everybody's seen them, unsubscribes on the bottom. All of those opt-out logics are built into the distribution channel as well. Where it gets super complicated is when you have multiple providers for each different channel. So if you have something that, if you have a platform that's managing two-way SMS, and so a agent or an adjuster or a call center agent can text one-on-one with a claimant, then that is one area where you are using text. Now, if you are using a different platform to send out mass texts, maybe related to a catastrophic notification or anything else that, a policy renewal, anything like that, and those two systems aren't talking to each other, then you risk losing that permission. Most importantly, the opt-out. So if someone opts out in one of those channels, but then the other channel doesn't know that, then they're texting against that person's consent. That's when, again, goods and bads, the United States, very litigious in the United States. They love to sue you if you text them something that they haven't agreed to receive. Then there's a really high legal risk. So making sure that any outbound communication platforms are all have their data amalgamated in one place, and then that data is also re-pushed out to all of the other platforms is the way to mitigate that risk.
I was on mute. Angie, Josh, anything to add on there? Josh, I think you're on mute.
Josh is on mute too. No, that was very well said. I'm not sure that I have anything else to add.
Yeah, no, that was a great overview. And generally what I would say is talk to Angie or Tracy about consent.
Delegate. That's what partnerships do, right?
I would love to talk about consent. It's my
Absolutely.
favorite thing to talk about.
All right, so we're pretty much out of time. If you have any other questions, this webinar is recorded. We'll be sending the recording link out to everyone for your reference. So if you have any other questions, you can always just send us an email back and we can direct you to the right party to answer any of those additional questions. But once again, we thank you guys for joining, and thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. So have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
Thanks, Angie and Josh.
Have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.